Today on Automation Bytes, we're going to talk about how you can easily automate repetitive business processes with the new version of ThinkAutomation. Stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to Automation Bytes, a series where I show you how to automate business processes using our new software solution, ThinkAutomation. I'm Nick Proud, I'm software architect here at Parker Software, and I'm really excited to show you the new version of ThinkAutomation. ThinkAutomation is an open-ended software solution for business process automation, and it makes it really easy to take manual processes and automate them. We, at the time of filming, have our version 4, which is currently out, and some of people who may be watching this video may be users of ThinkAutomation 4, but version 5 is upon us, and it's time for an introduction to it. I'll do another video which talks more about how you can transition between the two versions and the differences between the two, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to give you a basic introduction of how you can take a business process and you can automate it in ThinkAutomation 5. Let's do it. So, ThinkAutomation 5 looks like this. This is the dashboard for the ThinkAutomation Studio. I have it installed on this Windows 10 box, and it's pretty bare bones at the moment. I've not added anything to it. I've just booted it up, logged in. I've got a message source and an automation as default. So let me go into a little bit more information about what these are. So ThinkAutomation takes data from various different sources and then processes it according to a set of rules and logic that you configure here in the ThinkAutomation Studio. So a typical use case might be that you connect into an email mailbox. On a schedule, you pull in emails, you extract specific data from the email, and then depending on what that data is, you perform specific actions. So you may be looking for order numbers, or you may be looking for emails from a particular person, and then extracting that data. If the person is Bob, send an email to Bob and say, hey, I got your email. Not a very good use case, but you get the idea. It's not just limited to email. Things like databases, you may be pulling from a database. You may be querying an API, so you may be waiting for a webhook to update or something like that. But essentially, ThinkAutomation is going to sit there, listen to the source you've told it to listen to, and then react when it receives data. So a message source is how we do that. We configure the message source and ThinkAutomation starts listening. So let's do that. Let's create a new message source. So let's use that original use case. Actually, no, let's not use that original use case. It was terrible. Let's just do something very simple. Let's take the subject of an email and let's append it to a text file. That's just to demonstrate how we can get data out of an incoming piece of data, an incoming email, sorry, and then we can do something with it. So I'm just going to say read subject. This is just the name of the source. So I need to say what kind of source this is. So for us, we just want to plug into our emails. So I'm going to connect this into my Office 365 account, and I can do it like so. You can see here there's lots of different sources. Like I said, we're going to use Office 365 for this example, but there's Gmail, IMAP, POP3, and other sources not to do with email. So databases, you can plug into anything with an ODBC compatible driver, Microsoft SQL, Oracle, MySQL, MongoDB, any kind of major relational database platform. You can extract data from that database and then perform actions on it. Similarly, you may do something with files that are being placed on your file system. So this file pickup can listen for changes to a directory, whether it be local or on a network. It can pull the file in and it can parse data out of it and process it. HTTP GET, so this may be a situation where ThinkAutomation is listening to a HTTP endpoint, or it's querying an API. Azure Queue, so it's pulling data from a queue in Microsoft Azure. Twilio, so it's receiving SMS messages. You can text ThinkAutomation if you want to. So, these are examples of lots of different sources that you can use to retrieve data. But again, for our example, we're just going to use Office 365. So if I click Next, because I'm connecting to my Office 365 account, I need to log in. So I think I'm logged in on this computer already, so yeah, there we go. So I get all the folders in my account, just click inbox, click next, and then I need to say how often I want this to happen. How often do I want the message reader, which is a service within ThinkAutomation, to pull from this source? I'm just going to move that down to 1 minute. So we've created our source, but we need to be able to do something with the data that we've received. So when an email comes in, we want to run it against a certain set of logic. And this logic is contained within an automation. And what this is asking me is, which automation do you want to send this to? Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, I've got one automation that's there as default. And that's fine, but I may not necessarily want to send to that automation. So I can create a new one specifically for this source, which is what I'm going to do. So I'll click next and then finish. So you can see now we've got a message source called read subject, which is what we've just created. And it's also created an automation specifically for this source. So this source will receive emails and it will pass it to this automation. That's great. But at the moment, it's not really going to do that much because we've not given it any logic. We've not told it to do anything. Hence the reason the source is disabled by default. So before we turn that source on, let's go into the automation and let's look at how we can build an automation process. So if I double click this automation, we'll get the automation screen. On the automation screen, we can see what's called the toolbox on the left-hand side. This gives us all the available actions that we can use to automate our process. And we take the actions from that toolbox and we drag them into the action list. When actions are in the list, they will run sequentially. So they'll run one after the other, and hence an automation is born. So for our use case, we simply want to take the message subject and we want to write it to a text file. So I'm going to search in this toolbox for text file. And there's various options that contain that phrase, but we want read write text file. So I'm going to drag that in, and when we drag an action in, we get the screen which shows the configuration options for that action. So here are the options that we've got for the read write text file action. Now there are certain things on the actions that are present in every action that you drag in, regardless of what the action is. So on the left hand side, we've got various options. We've got the extracted fields, which I'll go into at a later time. These are essentially just variables that are representing data that we've extracted from our incoming source. Variables are variables that we just set within the actions themselves. So whenever you set a variable or a field, an extracted field in ThinkAutomation, you'll see them surrounded by percentage marks. They represent a value that you can reuse. There's some built-in variables though, which we're going to take use of. So here, for example, you can see the message body, message subject, message to, message from, and I think these are quite self-explanatory. These automatically pass out the specific values for elements of the incoming message. Now, it kind of looks like it's based on email, but it also applies to any other source. So even if this was a database record, message body would still apply. Because that would be the data content. Message date would still apply because it would most likely be the date that it was pulled from the database. So these are reusable regardless of what source you're using. So again, for our use case, we want to use the message subject. We want to write that to a text file. So I'm going to go into this message subject message variable. I'm going to drag it into this content box here. And so now we're creating a text file which will have that variable as the content. The subject of the incoming message will be the content of the text file that we're writing. It needs to go somewhere. Now we can either create the file and then keep rewriting the file over and over again, but I think we don't really want to do that. We want to append to that file and see all the subjects that we see coming in from the email mailbox. So we've got the append to file option enabled here. That's good, but because we've got that option, we're probably going to have to create the file first. So I'm just going to go into my file explorer. I'm going to go to my C drive. I'm just going to create a new folder, so I'm going to call it output. And then I'm just going to create a text file called subjects. And then in here, I'm going to just select that file. So, you do have the option to have ThinkAutomation create the file if you want to, but because we're going to have lots of different emails coming in, we don't want it to keep overwriting the file. We want to append to a file, so I've created it first. We could have got ThinkAutomation to create that file for us before if we wanted to with a file operation, as you can see here, but for simplicity, I'm just going to create it manually for this example. So I think that's our action set up. We are targeting a text file that we've got created in the output folder. The content of our text file is going to be whatever the subject is of the incoming message, and we're appending to that file. So I'll click OK. So we've got one action in there. Very, very simple automation, but it should do the job. So if I click Save, that's our automation taken care of. And we just need to enable our message source. Once we turn this on, it will connect to Office 365, and it will constantly be on a schedule, it will be checking to see if messages are available to process. So I'm going to enable that. Now this is the first sync, so it may take a few seconds. I'm just going to go to the log. There we go. So there's the messages coming in. And if I look at subjects, I can see that there is some data in there. And already we've got a bunch of subject lines in here. So you saw yourselves, I created the subject .text file from scratch. I didn't add anything to it, but ThinkAutomation has gone in and it's taken all the subject lines from my emails and it's dumped them into a text file. So I'm just going to show you some of the other actions that we've got in there. So they're split up into categories. So the common category has got field extractions. I'll probably demonstrate that first actually. So this is a good action to have. It's a very common action for taking data from an incoming source. A different use case might be that you're extracting order IDs and you want to take any order that starts with the number 4 and do a specific action with it. Very, very specific use case, but possible. So let's show you how to extract data in that manner. So this helper message section here is where you can create a sort of mock document that allows you to figure out the best way to extract fields. Whatever data you extract will be contained within a variable, the name of which you specify here with field name. So if I create a field called order ID, whatever I extract using this process will be the value of order ID, and I can use that variable elsewhere in the automation. So say we've got an incoming PDF attachment. We've got a source which is taking the attachments of emails, which we can do, and it's taking any PDF and it's extracting the data from it. This extract field will run and we'll be able to get the order ID. So we'll create our fake document. So we'll say it's got a bunch of fields like name, Joe Blogs, location, United Kingdom, order ID, some number. Okay. Now, because I named this field order ID, ThinkAutomation has assumed that we're looking for the term order ID, but you could change that if you want to. Actually, that is correct. That is what we're looking for. In any document that comes in, it's going to be in this format. We're going to be aware that there's going to be a field called order ID, followed by the number that we want to get. So I'm telling ThinkAutomation, look for this term and then extract whatever comes after it. And as you can see, it's done it. So if I was to click OK, I can see here I've got a new field called order ID, and the contents of that variable, that field, is an extraction from the body of the message, looking in that position using that configuration. Now, I could do some extra things with this if I wanted to, and we could use some conditions. We can use a sort of if this then that logic to the automation if we wanted to. So if I wanted to say, for example, if the order ID starts with the number 4, send an email to accounts to say new order, something like that. So if I search in the toolbox for if, we get this if block action, which is part of the flow category. I'll drag that into the bottom and we get a condition builder. So we could say if order ID, which is the field we've just created, if it starts with 4, then we have a block which will only run if that condition is true. So whatever we drag inside this block will be subject to this condition. So if we wanted to say, send an email, there we go, I pressed enter on the wrong thing. So I want to send an email if this condition is true, so I'll drag that in, and we get a send email configuration. So it's coming from my email address. I'm going to send it to accounts@mycompany.com, and I'm going to say new order, and for the subject, order ID, and I'm going to use that field that we created. And you can see the field is actually there as well. So we could, if we wanted to, we could drag that in, and that will be automatically rendered as part of the email. The actual value that we extracted will be there. So there's our email. We can attach some documents if we wanted to, but for this we just literally want to write a message to say a new order was received with ID, and then again you could put in order ID. And we've got some IntelliSense there as well, showing us that we're using an extracted field that we created earlier. That's just a plain text message, where I could do it via HTML if I wanted to. And so yeah, very basic, just sending an email. So it's telling me to configure email settings, which I can explain in another video. But you can see here, we now are building up a flow of actions to happen automatically. So from the very top, the message is coming in. We are writing the subject to a text file. Then we're extracting an order ID from the body. And if the order ID starts with the number 4, we're sending an email. So this could obviously be built up into a much longer automation with lots of different branching paths. And I hope you can see the potential for automating lots of different processes, especially considering the vast array of actions that are available here. On top of that, if there aren't, if an action is not available in there, you can write code. So if you're a developer and you wanted to write some specific code, and you can write C# or VB.NET, you can use a script action to write some custom logic. This was a very basic overview of how you would use ThinkAutomation to automate a process. I used some pretty sketchy use cases, but they were simple enough, I think, to demonstrate how you can use the software. I'm really excited to see what people do with this, and to get it into people's hands. At the time of filming, this is in a closed beta, so I think people will very soon be using this more and more. But if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us at parkersoftware.com, thinkautomation.com. You can find us on Twitter, Parker Software. You probably saw my email address in the video. I'll let you find it again. But otherwise, you can send emails over to support@parkersoftware.com, and we'll be happy to answer any further questions. Thanks very much, and I can't wait to speak to you a little bit more about ThinkAutomation.